welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here, we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. KiKi, welcome to the podcast. This process of getting on here was such a testament to trusting the timing and both of us just going with the flow and being flexible and understanding with each other. And it just makes it extra special to finally be sitting down to talk to you. So thank you for being here.
I'm so excited, and you're so right. It's been such a journey to connect and get together. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to be on the podcast. Thank you for having me.
Okay. What is something you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
That's a great question. Something that people might not know about me is my upbringing, I guess. I feel like people kind of, they see me on my Instagram. I'm very clear about like Meadow vibes in Southern California. But I had a really very unique and interesting upbringing with coming from a lot of different cultures and moving to the States pretty much as an immigrant, didn't know any English. I knew Spanish and German, and I came to the US to learn English. I mean, I was pretty young. But yeah, I would say the one thing that people might not know about me is just like the mix of cultures that I come from and my journey, moving to the States and my very non-traditional upbringing up in the woods in Northern California.
Wow, that's so interesting. Not that I know you super well, but I did not know that. I thought you were you give off very California vibes, especially with your brand. How do you feel like that part of your past and culture impacts you now, if it does?
Definitely. I think that I feel like I have such an expansive view of what's possible in life and how much is out there. I feel like I'm definitely a California girl through and through. I mean, I moved here when I was so young and like I definitely identify as that. But I think that coming from like a family of such different cultures and being raised by parents who prioritize and valued travel more than anything really made that be like one of my biggest values in life, and has, I've traveled to so many continents, both alone and through work, solo traveling with my family. And I feel like maybe it's like my Sagittarius moon, but I feel like it's opened up my eyes to like what's out there and like what's possible, and to never settle for what's just comfortable because it's like the known, like I'm never one to just like settle into something cozy and comfortable because it's like nice, and it's familiar. And so I think that's always led me to just push myself farther and farther towards like, yeah, just out of my comfort zone and into the unknown, because I feel like the unknown is just full of so much magic that we literally can't even imagine because we don't know it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I feel like there's all of life is unknown, really. And when we try to stay in the safe and comfortable, we're trying to cling on to what we think we can control and what we think is familiar, but really it's just this illusion of control. And so we might as well push ourselves to try something new. And and carve our own path, even though that is scarier. The control isn't real. Do you know what I mean?
Completely. Yeah, I feel like I always think so much about like, yeah, the illusion of safety and control, when in reality it's like most people are so uncomfortable and they're known in their comfort zone. It's like it feels cozy, but like the truth is that it feels like to our soul it's so heavy, but we just kind of like push it down because it feels so safe. And then I feel like a lot of people who do stay in their comfort zone, like things happen. Someone might play it safe and work in a job that they hate for 15 years because it's what's going to lead them to retirement, and then they get fired at 40 years old. And like, it's like, I think that we try so hard to control everything to feel safe, when in reality it's like, yeah, like you said, it's just an illusion.
Exactly. But when do you know when it's time to make a change? Like, when do you know that you're playing small or trying to stay safe and comfortable and that you really need to push yourself out of that?
I feel like everyone can gauge it differently depending on how inward you go, I think. I feel like the people who have yet to really cultivate that inner awareness and reflection, it can take a lot longer, but I think it hits us anyways, no matter, what our practices are. And in my opinion, I feel like our intuition whispers, and you can feel it at like a soul level, but it's just so easy to just be like, oh, well, I'll get there, like I'm busy, I can't even think about it. And then it just like hits you like a ton of bricks sometimes. And then there's like a season of life where, in my opinion, like I guess through my own experience and like the ones of my, my community, it always ends up, I feel like life always makes things so difficult when it's time to leave. Like you'll be in it and you'll be like, why is this happening? Like, why me? What am I doing wrong? Like you're not aware of like that bigger picture of like what the journey is and the path that it's leading you on. In the moment, it's like, why is this happening to me? Like, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing all the right things. I'm journaling and I'm manifesting, and like it gets so hard. And like in my experience, like even just this year, it's like curveball after curveball until it gets to the point where you realize it's like, oh, like I have to make a drastic change in my life because this isn't working for me anymore. And it gets so obvious where like you just can't hide from it. You can just accept it and like stay in it, or jump into the unknown and like jump off that cliff and just know that the net's gonna catch you. But that's usually been my experience, where it's like it gets a little dramatic sometimes. I feel like we don't often like make the change before it gets to that place. But everyone's different. Some people can just feel the inkling and like the whisper and they just go full force, and I know people in my life who do, but I do feel like things in your life get shaken up a little bit, and then you kind of just decide whether you want to stay in it or jump off into the unknown.
Yeah, and we were just touching on this before we started recording, how we've noticed ourselves and so many people are going through these transitions where they're kind of being pushed or forced to embrace a new path or let go of old versions of themselves, and then sit in this unknown of what's to come. And I think that that is so challenging for people. They want to cling on to who they once were and are so afraid of the empty space. And I would love to hear what season of life or chapter you feel like is ending in your life, and one that you think you might be entering into.
So I think that the theme of the last few years of my 20s has been breaking into my truest self and coming to terms with the fact that the relationships that I attracted in my life came from a place of my inauthentic shell of a version of myself, honestly, where I feel like I attracted so many people where I just wanted to help and be, the best that I could be for them. But the truth was that that wasn't me. And so there's been the last like 2 years specifically has been such a season of just shedding everything that I know and the community that I thought was mine. And it feels like it's gotten more and more dramatic, where like last summer, it was like my quote unquote best friend of like 8 years that I realized didn't know who I was, who just, I realized it's like, and I didn't even blame her, because I realized that she was just reacting to what I was putting, forward. But I was so deeply in my people pleasing that, in one example would be like, I wouldn't give my opinion. I would always like gauge what people thought, what I thought people wanted to hear, and I would like shift and mold my opinions to what people wanted to hear, until I realized one day that it's like, my opinion is valuable. People want to hear my opinion because I have good opinions. I have good taste. The world deserves to hear my true thoughts. And so a couple people kind of left my life, and the most dramatic, which has been this past season of my life, has been I just left a 6-year relationship with my partner who's still my best friend. And I think that's also part of why it's been so hard for us to connect because it's just been, my life has truly felt like it's been blowing up in the most painful but most beautiful way because I can feel that it's carving out, the life that I've been praying for, that these relationships just wasn't making space for. And so I'm definitely moving out of a season of my life of like shedding, everything that felt so comfortable and so cozy for me, but that I knew wasn't for my highest timeline. And I'm truly jumping into the unknown where I have no idea what this next chapter looks like for me. But even though it's like I'm grieving and I'm mourning the past relationships, the people in my life, the person that I have been, I really do feel like I'm opening up that portal to like everything that I've been praying for the last few years that I was just not letting in. So
thank you so much for sharing. I have so much to say. First of all, I think one reason why it's so challenging for people to let go of old versions of themselves is because of how it'll impact relationships
yeah,
and the version of ourselves that other people have grown comfortable with, and us fearing that these relationships won't grow and evolve with us. And yeah, maybe a lot of them won't. And that is scary and that is uncomfortable and that is something to grieve. And first of all, that doesn't mean that the relationships didn't serve us for a time and that they were bad.
yeah,
When you were with your partner for those 6 years, I'm sure for a lot of them, it was a really beautiful relationship. And same
yeah,
with the best friend, like they served you for a reason. So I think we have to kind of redefine what a successful relationship is. Like it's normal for us to keep growing and for paths to not always stay parallel all the time. And I think we don't allow ourselves to grieve relationships or to grieve past versions of ourselves. We think that grief is only put into one box
yeah,
and our emotions can only come out in certain ways for certain reasons for a certain amount of time. But I think as we're transitioning from one version of ourselves to the next, part of being in that in between is letting ourselves feel the grief and feel
yeah.
whatever comes up around that. So I'd love to hear about how this process has been for you and how you've been allowing yourself to be in the in between and feel this discomfort and this grief.
Thank you for that question. I want to also just mention really quickly, commenting on how you were saying how like not every that just because relationships end doesn't mean that they weren't like the most beautiful thing that could have ever happened. I'm reading this book, The Opposite of Settling by Case Kenny, and he was talking about this last chapter about like what he considers soulmates to be, and he sees us having so many soulmates in our lifetime, whether they're best friends or partners or any kind of relationship, and how the purpose of the soulmate is to like come into your life, shake everything up, and for you to help heal patterns. And I see myself in the relationship I was with my best friend and my partner, the beauty of it and then the ending of it helped me notice patterns that I had in my life that none of the subconscious work that I was doing allowed me to see as clearly as that relationship did. So I just wanted to mention that. And yeah, just to answer your question, I think that like the thing that's been helping me the most has been just celebrating the heaviness in the sense of just like really appreciating how deeply I'm allowing myself to feel all of it and how I know that it is so healthy. Where it's like, when it hurts the most and like when I'm feeling the pain the most, it hurts so much that the normal human reaction is to want to run away from it and to soothe and to get better and to feel better. And I think that like just acknowledging that like every time that I like allow myself to feel the full depth of it and truly, truly, truly feel it versus like running away from it and like moving on to the next thing and distracting myself and numbing myself, just holding myself in it and just knowing that like the depths of the pain that I can experience just means that the depths of the beauty and the wonder and the love and abundance that's going to pour into my life on the other side is going to be just as deep. And I really appreciate that because I know there's people in my life who like don't know how to let themselves feel that deeply. And it's not like they're not actually feeling it. They don't allow themselves to fully experience it. And it just comes in all the other unhealthy ways. So it's like, we still got to figure it out. We still have to like deal with it. But I feel like when we allow ourselves to just fully let ourselves get there and have it move through us, we clear it and then we allow the next versus the people in my life who just don't let them. It's like this excruciating long-term gunk that just gets stuck in there.
It all just builds up. The emotions are there no matter if we let ourselves feel them or not. And if
Yeah.
we don't, they just build up and come out in some other way. And I have really learned that the depth that we can feel our pain and our grief is the depth that we can feel the love and the joy. And I think the people who allow themselves to feel are people who trust themselves and who feel safe in their life, because I think that a lot of us fear our emotions, fear that we won't get through them, fear that we can't survive them. But when we know how to take care of ourselves, we know that we will make it through whatever comes our way. And I've really seen that people who trust themselves and know themselves are the ones who can allow themselves to move through these periods with more, I don't want to say grace because it's still messy and uncomfortable and
Yeah.
so challenging, perhaps even more so for them, but more fully, and therefore can be more fully alive. And it sounds like you're really allowing yourself to move through the process in this way. And I'm curious if you've always felt this kind of connection to yourself, to be able to feel your emotions, to know yourself and what you need, and how that has kind of evolved for you.
Definitely. I wouldn't say that I had. I feel like it's funny because people who meet me at this time of my life, my partner being one of them, who met me like right after my spiritual awakening, like in 2019, before 2019, I'm 26, about to turn 27. So I was still, yeah, like my late night, yeah, it was what, 19, 18? No, 20, I forget exactly. Anyways, before that time, like I considered myself to be an atheist. Like I was so science oriented and I made fun of astrology and spirituality and God, and like I was just so cynical about all of that. And I was honestly like a pretty cynical person. I think I say I am, although I know the people in my life would never have seen me like that. I think that I was, I would fall into really deep moments of depression and like heaviness. People would never expect that of me because I seem to be, a really positive, happy person. And I felt very disconnected from my emotions. I felt really disconnected. I would lean into drinking or partying, to really like numb my sensitivity because I've always been such an incredibly sensitive person and an incredibly intuitive person that I just like really like shut down and closed off. But then in 2019, I did mushrooms for the first time and with my sister and my best friend, and I didn't think I was feeling them. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna take more. And yeah, I felt them. and,
Famous last words.
and that set me off on the most magical, beautiful journey of my entire life. And that just set me onto the path of just like self-reflection and introspection and spirituality and connection to the universe and life, and like really set me towards opening myself up to feeling that, fullness of my being in my body. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey, but it's definitely been a learned one. I think that a lot of people see people who, are really in touch with themselves and do this work, and they think that it just like, oh, that's just who they are. Like it just comes naturally to them. But like it is work. It's a daily devotional practice of like unraveling yourself and being vulnerable and opening yourself up to the kind of person that you want to be, the life that you want to live, and constantly redirecting yourself from falling back into those subconscious patterns that like, you know, it takes work. The beauty of it is that like through that consistency and that devotional practice of showing up every single day and falling back and then falling in again, and like, those seasons of life where we feel disconnected and we come back into it, it's like we chip away at it day by day, that years go by and it just becomes who we are. It just becomes the version of ourselves that comes out most naturally. But yeah, I definitely feel like some people don't even try because they think that it's just that you are or you aren't. But I definitely do think that it's a devotional practice that you just have to decide that that's what you want, and you show up every day in pursuit of it.
I could not agree more. I've had a very similar experience, and we all fall out of center. We all fall off balance. It's impossible as a human not to. I think it's just about your reaction time being quicker and how far you fall off center being a shorter distance.
Yeah.
And then knowing the tools that get you back to
Yeah.
deep connection to yourself. And what was that spiritual awakening moment for you? Did you have one moment, or was it more of a evolution?
Well, before that time, I had never heard what the word manifestation was. Like I didn't know it yet. I wasn't in that, like my world was so oriented in just a different direction that like but I knew that there was this like, I had this like magic gift at like visualizing what I wanted and having it called into my life in the most absurd, ridiculous ways that like never made any sense. Like as small as like, I grew up in Northern California in the middle of nowhere, no connections to the film industry or LA or the music industry. I just had big dreams. Like I've always been a filmmaker. I've always known that I wanted to go move to the city and be a part of pulp culture, and like no clue how I was ever going to make that happen. And I remember I was in philosophy class. We had this like hippie philosophy teacher who, because we went to a really hippie high school and I went to the hippier high school that was like the comm school. And he would like grow weed in his backyard, like right outside the window of the class. And I remember just like, and whenever we would read a book that I wasn't really interested in, I would just be on my laptop on Tumblr looking at photos of G-Eazy, because I had a dream of being like a concert videographer. And he had a specific videographer that I really loved and his work, And so I would just be constantly browsing it, looking at videos and like just dreaming, nothing, no intention. Like it was just like, oh, this would be so cool if I could do this. And then flash forward a year, like within a year, I go to a concert and I meet a photographer. One thing leads to another, and I end up touring with G-Eazy, being a videographer, shooting for him. And then even fast forward later, I end up meeting that videographer that I was dreaming about so hard. I ended up getting hired to work on his project in Tokyo and like going to Japan and becoming friends with him. And anyways, that was all happening in my teens. I was 17 years old at that time. And then once I had that mushroom experience, I was like, holy shit, there's something here. I look back on my life and how I would call things into existence and they would just happen. And I was so good at it. And like, I didn't know what it was called. And then I realized that there was this whole world of books and people talking about manifestation and what that is, and like how we have the power to actualize our visions into reality. And it blew my mind because like before I knew that this was happening, but I didn't know there was a word to it. I didn't know that it was a thing. And then that spiritual awakening, it was like the craziest thing in the world, because suddenly there's thousands of books and art like leaders and thought leaders and people talking about this, and it was just like the most beautiful rabbit hole I ever went on. But it was also the most like calm, centered, grounded one, that like it wasn't even like I dove into all manifestation. I think the first book that I read after my spiritual awakening was The Power of Now. And I remember that whole summer I was living in LA, and that's kind of like how the Meadow was born, kind of, where I would just go to the one park that had no service, and I would sit there for 7 hours just reading my book, looking at the trees, just like being like, whoa, like this is it. Like we've made it. So yeah, I don't even remember exactly what the question was, but
No, I love that story. Mushrooms and manifesting meeting G-Eazy.
yeah.
So and that was before you even knew about any structured way to call this into your life. So do you have rituals or practices now that you kind of lean into to connect to your intuition, to connect to yourself, and also I guess this also ties into like bringing yourself back to center when you start to feel out of balance?
Totally. I feel like it's been a funny journey because like at the beginning of my, spiritual journey, I felt it was so innocent and like open. I was in Europe one time talking to this guy and all about all this magic. And like I remember talking about how it's funny when we first have our spiritual awakening, it's like, and I think it's kind of cheesy to even say spiritual awakening, but like, you know what I mean? It's like you suddenly are open to like this vastness of knowledge and like ideas and things that are so mind-blowing to you that it's like, oh my God. But it feels like, over the years, things become a little less shocking and less like, it's a little bit more, you get used to these things where it doesn't feel like you have that crazy, like, everything's like new and different, but it's like gradual, where it's like we're constantly opening up to these like completely breaking open into these new parts of ourselves in the universe. And like, it's a little bit more gentle. But I think that the biggest thing that has helped me come back to center has been taking a pause from like entrepreneurship and building a brand, and that all the masculine things that it takes to be a voice in this space and to build and create. I think that for me, the deeper I fall into that, the more I get disconnected from like the reason I started it all in the first place. I think that the things that bring me back to center are the most simple that I just forget about. And like number one being like when I'm so in my masculine and so just like go, 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 like rushing and hustling and like the times that I'm the busiest, I have to just stop myself and go to the grocery store or the farmer's market and cook the longest meal that I could possibly cook. Like stew a soup for 4 hours and slowly cut the vegetables and slowly, or just go to the park without my phone and a book or like, as simple as just like tapping in the morning and doing my, my journaling, my morning pages, you know, praying. It's like it feels like when I'm so disconnected, it takes so much for me to come back into center. But every time that happens, it proved to myself that it's actually so simple. You just got to do it.
Simplicity is key and is everything to me. I honestly keep getting this message of simplicity is the most spiritual practice that you
Yeah.
could devote yourself to, and really trying to lean into simplicity and stillness and slowing down and softening and matching that with all of my ambition and dreams. And like the busier things get, choosing more and more simplicity and more softening. And that's very challenging in a world that tries to tell us otherwise. And it's one thing to say, I'm going to slow down and choose simplicity and go to the farmer's market. But I think people still struggle to actually get themselves to get up and do it. And I would love to hear if you've had those moments where it's hard to actually meet the embodiment of your intentions and what you do in those moments.
Honestly, I would say every single day, it's hard to meet the embodiment of those moments. Every single day. Every day, it's like, I feel like we have such a deep resistance to allowing ourselves to feel just ease and rest. I think that the deeper part of that, which is what I've learned makes the biggest difference, is that deeper subconscious worthiness wound of trusting that you've done enough. Even if maybe this week wasn't the most productive week, if you're going through something, if you need that extra support, that you are worthy of taking that hour-long bath with your herbs and salts and whatnot. For me, the deeper embodiment of how it bleeds into every aspect of my life, both allowing myself to slowly cook a meal, allowing myself to go to my hot yoga class at night, even if I have a couple more things I wanted to get done tonight. All of that is that physical, actionable, day-to-day things. But when it comes to designing the life of our dreams and designing a life that feels so good now, and breaking through the manifestations is just trusting that we're enough right now, even if we're so far away from what we want to create. And even if this year we've let ourselves down countless times and we've fallen through in our commitments and our promises, it's this knowing that like we are enough right now. It's so hard, but I think that that's a little shift that I try to get myself to in that moment when I feel myself resisting, when I feel myself wanting to sleep in and just self-sabotage. It's a deep breath, closing my eyes for a little bit and really trying to tell myself that again and again and again and again and again. And then hopefully sometimes I do meet myself in that embodiment and I do push myself to do the thing. But yeah, I feel like it's something that we all struggle to do. I think that we even see people who are doing it visibly every day. We all go through a certain degree of it. Everyone moves themselves through it in a different way, I guess.
The worthiness wound, this not enoughness, I feel like that fuels so many people's actions. And this is why I think that intention is so important, because it's really not what you're doing, it's how and why you're doing it. And we can think that we're just pursuing our dreams and doing all these things and we just love being a doer, but really it's all coming from this need to prove ourselves. And so
Yeah.
we can get really clear on what actions in my life am I taking because I actually want to, and because they're leading me towards what I actually want, versus just trying to prove myself or do things at the pace I think I'm supposed to. And I think all of us just need to allow ourselves to slow down and bring more intention into our lives. And then at the end of the day, forgive ourselves for the ways that we weren't perfect.
I feel like a quote that I read recently that changed so much. It's just these little things that we like we can't hear enough, you know? We hear these things and we just cannot hear them enough. And then one day they click in a better way that push us to the next. I forget, I can't say the quote exactly, but it's about letting go of our attachment to our worthiness with the outcome of what we're creating. I launched a brand this year that I was building for a whole year or two that I realized was not in alignment for me and that I had to change everything. And things where we put so much pressure on the actions that we want to take and the things that we want to call into this world because we have this heaviness of like, it needs to work because that'll make me so worthy and like worthy of my dreams and the money and the recognition. If we're able to detach that and like fully allow our sense of worthiness to come from within and from our own practices and our self-love, and that the actions we take and the things that we pursue are an extension of us, but they are not us. And knowing that the only successful people in the world are ones that got good at failing or good at trying one thing and it not working and doing it again and not letting it hold them back or have that weight. And I also think that it's a topic that kind of came up earlier in the conversation about like allowing ourselves to feel the depths of the grief and the heartbreak and the heaviness and that also has to do with the extent to how vulnerable we can feel and how vulnerable we allow ourselves to feel. People who are meant to do great things in the world have to feel so incredibly vulnerable because like we're putting our heart on our sleeve and we're like naked, putting our whole soul out there and knowing that like things will change and we'll have amazing wins and sometimes we'll have losses, but it's the capacity to which we allow ourselves to feel all of it and to feel naked and have our heart in our sleeves and be so vulnerable. It can hurt so much, but again, it opens us up to everything that we've ever wanted and to the depths of that abundance and flow and ease that gets let in on the other side of that.
Yes. I think that another reason why people stay safe and stay comfortable is because going after what we truly want is so vulnerable. Like opening this physical space for my business, choosing this dream, and creating what I am from scratch is the most vulnerable thing I've ever done. It is so scary, and it takes me being willing to be seen messy and imperfect and doing things unknown, being a baby in the world, and to let myself just be in that. I would really love to talk about, if you're open to it, how you mentioned that you were spending years on this brand and then you launched it and you realized, wait, this isn't what I want. And one thing I want to say is, again, this goes back to redefining what success means, because that doesn't mean that any part of that process was unsuccessful. In fact, it was probably super informative for you and is a core component that's going to lead you to the next step. But I think that it's so hard to be able to admit to ourselves and others when there's something that we need to release. And any part of that process and that realization and that decision, I would really love to hear about.
Totally. I mean, one quote that just like I think helped me get through and continues to is about like, you know, if you realize that you got on the wrong train, get off of it as soon as you can versus like staying on it because you already got on it and then the trip back is going to be so much harder and so much more expensive if you don't just let it go, you know? And I think that it's like this weird balance between trusting your intuition and then knowing when you're just self-sabotaging and you're staying small. So often we'll just start and stop projects and give up on things because we don't feel safe enough to pursue them. And then sometimes it's just not right for you and you just have to be honest with yourself. And just to sum up my journey really quickly, just for everyone to know, I've just been such an aggressive entrepreneur all my life. And I feel like I have such big, like, I want to do so much. And I think that I've tried to narrow down on these different pockets and thinking that I'm just chasing the right thing when all along it's all about just realizing that I am worthy of like teaching and expressing my gifts and receiving financial income because of it. But I was avoiding that and I wasn't looking at that for so long and I was just dabbling in all these different things. So at the beginning of 2024, I was committed to launching a course business about reality creation, manifestation, and mindfulness and whatnot. And so I spent that full year in these masterminds, paying all this money to be taught all these things. So I have all the information, I know all the tools, but I couldn't bring myself to be the teacher because I had all these worthiness wounds. And I ran away from it. And I was like, okay, this is too vulnerable. I don't want to be up here being the face and trying to sell my teachings. And so I decided I want to start like a physical product line that was going to be like a, and it still is. I don't mean to say it was going to be, but like it was supposed to be the main part of like these physical products and like a platform for creativity and community. But I realized that I was just running away from my own gifts and the things that I wanted to create in this world and the things that lit me up more than anything, which is my podcast and which is teaching and having conversations with people. But here I was a year and a half into this journey dealing with production issues and inventory and all these like things that I was like, I got to the point and I launched and it went great. I sold out of my products. I was on the right track to having this be a success. But I sat there after I had the success of the launch and I was so empty and so drained. I hadn't been on my podcast for months. I hadn't been teaching anybody for months. I was just dealing with all these nitty-gritty like production issues. And I realized I was like, this isn't what I want to do. If I can visualize the most successful version of it, I would be miserable. The success of this means that's all I'm going to be doing is dealing with the production and inventory and all this. And I'm not even on my podcast. And so the moment that that happened, it was such a crazy feeling because it was working. Like there was success and I still had to look at that and be like, this isn't my path. It felt like I was starting from square one, but like you said, it's like that couldn't be farther from the truth. Like I needed to go through that experience. I needed to go through the losses and the grief of like shutting down the LLC that I had and like, dealing with all like the investments that I made. That was again at this grieving process of feeling so fighting against that feeling of failure and feeling that that had something to do with me, quote unquote, failing, and just trusting and knowing that that was just guiding me towards really nailing into what I was meant to do. And now I'm on such a beautiful journey of really tuning into that. And it always comes back to my podcast and my platform and realizing that I can simplify and be worthy of this becoming a business. And so I'm kind of like I am in this really, really nuanced, like floaty place of the unknown and of letting go. And I just am so excited for this next year. I don't know if this is a little bit off topic, but I have to mention if you know anything about zodiacal releasing astrology, there's like a certain subset of astrology that's like this old astrology that has to do with zodiacal. There's chapters essentially of how it reads your chart. It's like slightly different than regular astrology, but I'm essentially, when I read it this year, a couple months ago, and it's so funny that 2025 is this transition of like the supposedly the biggest transition of my life, where 2025 and before the last like 14 years was I was in the lot of fortune of Aries, meaning that I was just hustling and building and creating and traveling, learning my philosophical beliefs in life, and then just so much output and doing and like intense work. 2025 is this like limbo of like shedding that old version of myself. And then I'm moving into the lot of Taurus for the next 15 years, meaning that it's a much more slow and grounded and embodied attracting space of stepping into leadership in a really gentle, less like hasty, like go, 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 launch, 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 and kind of, moving into that. And so that was a really funny thing to realize. And I really feel, whatever your beliefs are on, the astrological aspect of it, I really do feel this next chapter being a much more embodied, just slower, attracting space.
Now I'm like, I need to look this up for myself.
Yeah.
I'm like so curious.
It was mind blowing when I heard it. I was like, oh my gosh.
That's going to be my evening activity. It's so important for us to hear these kinds of stories. We have been talking about so many people are afraid of going after their dreams and pushing themselves out of their comfort zone because they think that if something like that were to happen, it wouldn't be okay. So more people being honest about their journeys empowers more of us to go after it, because I haven't met one entrepreneur or one person who's achieved their goals who hasn't had a moment like that, who hasn't had something that the world would deem a failure or embarrassing or fill in the blank here. And so us putting words to that and also grieving it and also celebrating it both. Again, it comes back to feeling the grief and the joy, because you relinquishing that business, it's something 100% to grieve and it's something to celebrate. And we need to allow ourselves to feel and do both.
Completely. And I also want to mention as well, people think that we're chasing this goal, this like end point of like, I want to become a successful business owner or I want to be a millionaire or whatever it is. But that's never what we're in search of. You know, the journey is so gradual where it's like you're in the depths of it, you're slowly building, you're slowly opening your store, but where it's like once it's open, it's like you're already there. You were already there steps before that. We think we're in pursuit of these goals, but in reality, we are in pursuit of the version of ourselves we become in the pursuit of these goals. I feel like the last year and a half has been so hard and so much loss and grieving of my business and relationships, but I am the most resilient version of myself I've ever been. You know, a year ago, I would get queasy trying to email somebody that I looked up to. Now I'm like, oh my God, I've been through way more, way too much stuff to let that phase me anymore. And I remember I heard this one businesswoman talking about how it was like the same thing for her, where she reached her $1 million in sales on a plane next to the toilet that was flooding and it smelled like shit. In that moment, it isn't that like crazy magical thing that you think it's going to be. It's who you are now at that point. And so that's something to think about as well. We're putting the dreams and goals a little bit off the pedestal and know that it's your North Star, but you are achieving that dream every day that you wake up in pursuit of it. You're already getting what you want because you're becoming the person that is capable of achieving it and who will have achieved it, which is the most valuable thing we could ever ask for.
The becoming is the whole point. We think that we're trying to get to this end goal, like, oh, the $1 million, opening the business, like that's the destination, that's the goal. But really, once we get there, it's just the start of the next chapter. Like me opening my business, I've been so intentional in not framing this as once I open the business, that's the goal, that's the point. When it's really like, no, that's just the start. Then I live in the business. Then I become the person who owns it and who invites people into it. And that's true for all areas of our life. Like we're always just, first of all, in then some sort of in between. We're always letting things go and stepping into the next chapter. We're always growing. And the whole purpose of life is to be in process and to keep becoming and keep growing. And we can't just have this one static goal that we put on a pedestal and are always trying to achieve and prove we're worthy of, because that's not the point of life at
Yeah.
all.
I think that some people will hear that and feel very unsettled by, oh, what do you mean we're not going to feel that when we get there? But like, I think it's the opposite where it's like, it's such a peaceful, it can give you so much peace when you can realize that like, you can breathe deep and just know that you're already there. Like everything you can ever ask for and need is right here. And of course, we all come from different backgrounds and are dealing with different things. Like, don't get me wrong, I know it can be so hard, but like, you know, when we have like a roof over our head and water and safety, it's like, we're good and we can choose to realize that we're living the dream now and that like this is our becoming. This is the story that we look back on in our lives and we're going to look back on with fondness. And it's such an inner choice of just knowing that like even when things aren't going out right and they're not and you're not there, maybe you're dealing with things financially or relationship wise, but it's like you can just open your eyes and choose to find that quote unquote dream life like now, which is so empowering.
Absolutely. And, I am someone who has big goals and dreams and see myself as a pretty ambitious person. And at the same time, what's coming to mind when you're talking is there's no destination. We've arrived. Like we're
Yeah.
here. And so we have to live our life in that way. Otherwise, we're never present. We're never going to actually be in our life.
Completely. My friend Eric John Campbell, who's like this author, has like this quote in his book that I always think back on that it's like if we're constantly unsatisfied with the present moment, we're only ever going to be manifesting a future reality where we are unsatisfied with the present moment. It doesn't matter if you have the $1 million house or a yacht or if you're like at the top of your career. It's like those things don't mean as much as we think they do at all.
I love hearing you talk about how you're connecting more to your desire to focus on the podcast and trust your own gifts and your own wisdom and just let it pour out of you and know that that is worthy of reciprocity and acknowledgement, because I can just like feel that in you. And I feel like that connects to your creativity, your intuition. And so, what is your relationship like with your intuition? Do you consider yourself an intuitive person? What does that look like, feel like? And has that always been present for you?
I definitely do think it's always been present for me as long as I can remember. It wasn't until, I turned 19 and I had that experience that allowed me to like see it for what it was and connect to it. And I think that it's just been this ever becoming process of just trusting it, honestly. I think that like I have felt it so deeply for so many years, but I've always just felt delusional for it. I've always seen these visions for my life and for the life of the people in my life, and I think that like I would always just gaslight myself into just being like, you're crazy. And so I think that this chapter of my life has just been just trusting myself wholeheartedly and knowing that like that I can believe in that in myself. And the more that I just quiet the world, the clearer I can hear it. And when it comes to even just quieting the noise of the entrepreneurship world and how we're supposed to do things and how we're supposed to make decisions and like having that balance of like education and learning and you know being a forever student and then shutting the lights off and going to the park and putting my headphones on and just quieting and listening, because I think that our soul is always talking to us. It doesn't matter if you're an incredibly intuitive person or maybe not as much. I think that there's always some message that we can tap into as long as we just quiet the noise of the world. The world is so noisy. Oh my gosh, it is so freaking loud. And I think that just cultivating those practices of introspection and connecting to your inner wisdom is so special and so important.
And I really do believe that everyone is intuitive and everyone can connect to their intuition and build that muscle and that trust and that confidence. And I really do think that the key components are knowing ourselves and quieting the noise. And I'm
Yeah.
someone I am definitely a forever student. I love learning and I love having teachers and just always growing in that way. But I also really do have to be one, very discerning with who I'm learning from and the information and stimulation I'm taking in. And two, know when to stop and know when to
Yeah.
be like, okay, I know enough to share
Yeah.
and I know enough to be confident in what I'm sharing. And that is a practice that really I have to do every day, even though I've been studying and teaching and sharing for years now. I have to remind myself of that all the time. I am curious how you remind yourself of that, how you navigate that for yourself.
When you were saying that, like, I just had a visual pop into my mind of like a sponge, of like you squeeze the sponge out and you fill it with water, but eventually there's a limit to how much water can fit in it, and you have to squeeze it out again to make the space for you to come back in. Because I feel the same exact way where I would go through these chapters of just learning and learning and learning and learning, but it almost would like, this is a dramatic word to use, but it would almost like rot in my head a little bit because I wasn't using it. I would learn, but I wasn't taking the action to walk the talk and actually use the learnings by teaching and putting myself out there and doing the damn thing. And so I've just learned, again, simplicity. The simplicity aspect is so important, to not intellectualize it too much. For me, putting it in this binary of consuming or creating and just needing to touch base with myself every week to see how much the levels have shifted, where more often than not, I'm just consuming way more than I'm creating. And rather than intellectualizing it and getting super detailed about how I got to get out of it, I just have to ask myself, am I consuming or am I creating? I'm in a time of just like slowness right now where I feel like I'm not even doing that much of either. But I know once I get back into my regular flow of life and my teachings, I just have to just trust that like I got to ask myself every week, where am I? Where am I right now? I have to just show up and send the newsletter out, make the post, record my podcast, reach out to a guest that I'm excited about. I can feel intuitively once I've drained that in a really healthy way where I feel like I've done the exercise and I can rest a little bit and then I can go back into consuming. But it's hard. I mean, I think it's a battle, but we have to like rebel against the algorithm and the system that society has given us of just constant media, constant shit to be looking at in the world, and truly rebel against that and fight against that and know that like this is not what we want for our lives, to just be these endless consumers, and that it takes so much effort being in this overstimulated world. That's an act of rebellion, and it helps others also do the same.
I like how you pointed out how you're in this period of slowness and not consuming or creating that much, because again, that's an in between, a transition. And I think that one reason why so many people consume so much is because they're afraid of that empty space, of that
Yeah.
in between. And we have to allow ourselves to be in seasons of slowness. We have to allow ourselves to be in that empty space and not label it any sort of way and just trust that one phase will lead to the next and we'll eventually move into a new chapter in our life, but that the empty space is not meant to be filled before it's ready to be.
Oh my gosh, knowing that we're seasonal, cyclical beings and we are nature, and that nature's not running all year long.
Exactly. Embracing seasonal living has helped me so much with this and has allowed me to slow down and really be okay with the emptiness and the different phases and cycles that I move through, because we are not meant to always be in an external summer doing and producing and creating. And we really have to allow ourselves to constantly be moving through the cycles that we need to. If there's one thing that you could declare right now that you are releasing and that you just want to shed and not pick back up, what would it be?
Staying small. Yeah, staying small to be digestible and safe, I guess. I feel like this next season of my life, I want to take up the space and be more fluid and weird and not try to curate my expression as much as I have to be safe in a little box. And so I'm definitely want to break through and be my eccentric, weird, fluid self. Be loud and take up space and trust that that's what I'm meant to do and that people that don't like it can do me the favor of getting out of my orbit.
100%. I love that. And I'm with you on that. That's a big intention for me in this phase of my life, too.
Mm.
Living intuitively wild means connecting to your true self and living dedicated to who you are at your core, no matter what. How do you feel like you live intuitively wild?
Oh, it's so beautiful. I think that I have been living intuitively wild more than ever in this season of my life in just this self-honesty and just being honest with myself and being honest in what relationships aren't working, what paths aren't working, what habits aren't working, what dynamics aren't working, and having this raw and brutal honesty with myself and having to face that and not only being true and honest, but taking action on it as well. So not just knowing that it's not working, but taking that just brutally painful action to confrontational action against it. That's where I'm at right now.
So important. I think that, again, it's not just the intention, it's the embodiment of it. And even you coming on here and sharing everything you did and just being honest about where you're at in your process is huge. That's living intuitively wild. That's embodying what you just said. Those are the kinds of people that I want to surround myself with. People who are really being in integrity and honest and just willing to show up messy
Yeah.
and in the imperfections of life.
I feel like we always want to curate ourselves to just show that we all have our shit together and that everything's great and you can like listen and believe in us. But I've learned so deeply that when I look at my favorite creators, they can teach and be their boldest, most alive, abundant selves, and it's amazing. But then the moment that they open up to the depths of the heaviness of the real trueness of the work of shedding the old and the grief and the pain and the insecurities and the unworthiness, nothing gives you more life than hearing people's real stories, because then that just shows that you can be so successful and still feel this, so that it's not bad, it's not a negative thing. And we're all going through something similar. We're all human. No one's immune to it. And so even though it feels vulnerable, it's such medicine for people to hear who might be going through similar things.
And we can all do that in small ways in our life. I'm always challenging myself to allow more of myself to be seen, even by editing my podcast less or allowing myself to stumble over my words. And it's a really good practice to sit down with ourselves and say, how can I just allow myself to be less curated and perfected in my life? How can I just allow myself to show up as I am and allow that to be perfect? So maybe that's a little ritual people can sit down with. KiKi, thank you so much for being here. Is there any last words you want to share before we go?
I just have to say that I'm so grateful we did this. I've been very disconnected from my podcasting world. I've been diving back into solo episodes, but this has been so refreshing and another example of just like my ego and like the small part of me hearing an invitation for a podcast, and my first reaction is like, I'm not in the right headspace for this. I'm not my most inspiring highest self right now. I'm going through a lot. But then just realizing how much this is just medicine for me and for the people that are in our communities, and that this just uplifted me so deeply, and I'm so grateful for the space and this beautiful conversation, and I'm so excited to see the future of your unraveling with this business and all of the next year for all of us. I'm really excited to see how everything unravels after the murkiness of this eclipse season and a crazy astrological year in general. So I'm really excited.
Yes, of course, it's okay to be private with our evolution and go inwards in certain phases of our life. And also, I think it's so powerful to allow ourselves to share these parts of ourselves, to share ourselves while we're in the in between. It just comes back to we don't need to have it all together. We don't need to be perfect. You're already worthy of sharing your voice, and so much wisdom just came out of you. And I'm also really excited for your evolution. As we've talked about, there's so many people who are moving through these in-betweens and transitions. And I think that we're all entering this next phase of our becoming that's going to be really, really powerful. And I'm very excited for all of us. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.